Hi everyone, it's Sammy. So today we're going to go over some super basic Procreate tips from opening a file, adding an image, making a color palette, layer masks, and things like that. So I pretty much used Procreate for all of last year for sketches like this, down to final drawings like sections. I did line work in Rhino and then rendered these in Procreate. I wanted to explore a hand drawing, but wanted to use as little paper as possible, and visualizations and perspectives like these ones. Jump right in. The first thing you want to do is open up Procreate where you have all of your drawings. I usually just start with a new canvas. So I have a 10 by 10 that I always use, but I'll just show you how to make a new one. So you're going to click that button in the top right. Adjust the width, the height, and the DPI. I usually switch it to inches and make it something like 10 by 10 or 8.5 by 11. I usually keep it small so that it's not a huge file size. And then I stick with 300, usually I wouldn't go higher than that, but that does limit the maximum layers that you're allowed to have. So if you go down to 250 DPI, for example, it's going to be lower quality, but you can have more layers. But I usually don't need that many layers. You have most of your controls up at the top, and then there's a slider bar on the side that controls your pen width and opacity. And you have your layers. I don't really use that smudge tool, your colors, your palettes. There's lots of options for colors. And then you have your adjustments layer. There's a whole bunch to play around with. You have your kind of controls like copy paste. And then you also have this little selection tool which allows you to rotate or move around an object. For example, if I draw this line, I can switch that around, rotate it. If you turn off the snapping, that allows you to move it a little bit more freely. And by the way, a 2-finger click on the page will undo. So the next thing I would do would be to switch this interpolation to bicubic. That just means that it's going to be a little bit less pixelated the more that you transform an object. And if you switch between freeform and uniform transformations, it's pretty self-explanatory. I switch between these all the time. What we're going to do is figure out how to add an image or a file to this canvas. So you're just going to go into this little wrench button here and insert a file. You can also pick an image from your camera roll. And we're going to pick this plan here that I made on Rhino, just to show you guys how you can actually use this image to create a color palette for your drawing. So you're going to open up your colors here and go to palettes. I have this old color palette here I'm going to delete, and then you're going to press the plus button and you're going to choose from file, and then you're going to go back and pick that plan there. So that gives you a color palette of all the colors in that drawing. You can set it to default and that'll be right there when you go to the disk. So the other way to select a color from this image is to click this little square in between your sliders and move this little circle around to find the color that you want, because if you look in this palette, I can't really tell exactly what gray it is that I want, but if I just use this circle, I can find that kind of cream color and use that to draw with. And another image from a site visit, and I'm going to group these layers. It's really important to keep your layers organized, and I'm going to call this just images. So I would maybe use an images group, a fill group, and a line work group. And if you choose this little N here, that's going to pull up a huge list of transparency modes you can choose from. And you can also adjust the opacity slider for any layer. So I'm going to show you how to use one of these transparency modes to layer a different kind of drawing on top of this one. So let's say I want to have this section right on top of the image for whatever reason. I don't know why I would do that, but maybe I want this section right there on the image, but the background's white. So I'm going to click the N on that inserted image layer, and I'm going to move it up to multiply. And that's going to take away the white in the background. And then I can actually just go in and erase the things I don't want. But instead of doing that the hard way with the eraser, that is pretty permanent, you can't really bring it back after that. I'm going to show you how to use a layer mask, similar to how it would be in Photoshop. You're just going to click on that layer and check mask. And this is going to work where black pen is going to erase and white pen is going to bring it back. So you're going to want the true black and the true white here, so that might be a time when you use value on the bottom there, and you can slide them around to get the true black and the true white. So I'm going to use the black, and I'm going to get rid of things that I don't want. You might want to use a bigger brush. And that's going to act like an eraser, except that it's going to keep the information behind it. Sorry, my camera's shaking. My desk is really unstable and my tripod's on the desk, so I'm going to fix that for next time, but we'll have to manage. Sorry if it makes you seasick. And then the white is going to do the opposite, so it's going to bring it back. So if I want to, let's say, keep this plan and the section, I can kind of go through the motions and use maybe a smaller brush and erase the fine details around it. But this is really handy for not being too destructive with your drawings and keeping information there so you don't have to reinsert the image and do it all over again if you decide you want to change something or bring something back. So those are layer masks. For the purpose of an assignment, I want to sketch or trace an image on Procreate. So I'm going to start by making a new layer, and I'm going to reduce the opacity of the layer I will be tracing just so it's a little bit easier for me to see what I'm doing. And I'm going to select this green, or I could pick it from the palette. And I'm just going to use the, what's it called? Tinderbox brush. That's one of my favorite ones, but you can use any brush. And I'm just going to make a really rough outline of the grass. I want to fill this grass with a green color. This is just for very basic purposes. But that kind of leaves me with limited options of what I can do at that point. So what I'm going to do is make this a outline layer, and then I'm going to do that same fill technique but on a new layer. So as you can see, when I drag the color to the outline, it's not going to recognize it because it's on a different layer and it's going to fill the whole canvas. But I can use something called a reference layer. Click on the layer and click the reference option. And that's going to reference that layer on any other layer that I use. So I can drag and drop that even on a different layer and it's going to fill it, no problem. And that way I can kind of use just that fill and change the opacity, maybe turn off the outline, and that leaves me with some more options instead of just doing everything on one layer. What I'm going to go over with this object selected is just the transform tools. So if I want to, let's say, copy and paste this shape, I can use a freehand selection or a rectangular selection, pretty much anything that I want. The button is just that measuring tape at the top. Select whatever part of it I want to copy and paste, press copy and paste. That's going to make that selection duplicated on a new layer. And from there, I can use this little cursor button, I can flip it, I can rotate it. Brings us pretty much to the end here. I'm going to leave the name of a creator I found on TikTok that has a lot of Procreate tips, but if you have any questions for me, just let me know.